Hello, let's make a quick test. How sound is working. Cool, seems to be working fine. We're going to start in a bit. Okay, hello. Let's start. So a bit of a problem here. The problem. Ah, mic is here. So yeah, let's start. A bit of a problem here. I already encountered it before, but it kind of worked out. This problem just disappeared by on its own, but for now it's not for some reason. So just quickly to do some small adjustments that could come on, please show me capture. So probably now it's going to show. Yeah, so it's like it needs to figure out what type of monitor to capture. So yeah, again, hello. Let's just slowly try to work our way through our projecto. In previous streams, on last week's streams, we basically talked about how to work with a explorational 2D sketching stage. So basically we're still on this stage, but we already finished. There's a little bit things that we need to address before moving on to the next stage, because again, as I said before, the main thing for us at this stage is to know as much as possible before we're going to move on, because again, the more we know on this stage, the better we will work at later stages. So that's why we spending so much time on this stage. Again, the more experience you have, the less time you will spend on this stage. Yeah, so yeah, that's it. So yeah, let's just slowly try to remember where we left off. So basically we talked about composition mainly. We try to establish perspective, we try to establish compositional flow, we try to establish how gesture is going to work generally, what type of movement there's going to be inside of our scene, how presumably objects are going to be placed, subjects and environment going to look. So again, also I had a little bit of time to think how to approach this project from this point on. So there was two ways how I could approach this project. First way is to work in 2D only, so not using 3D at all as a guide for more probably realistic perspective. But again, since we already established a perspective grid on our own without use of 3D, it doesn't seem that logical to go into 3D because most of the work we already did. We still need to correct perspective mistakes in terms of a table, chairs, and the things on this table, the characters itself. So probably before we will approach next stage or next part of this stage, which is finally going to be trying to figure out what type of pose we would choose for every of this character. Again, the pose choice is going to be directed by these 4 gesture qualities that we depicted earlier. So again, when we're talking about red, he has to be tense, so in his gesture has to be tension. When we talk about bomb, he has to have some type of hesitation in his gesture. When we talk about Chuck, we want to address unpredictability. And of course, when we talk about bubbles, we want to address freedom in this gesture. So basically, before we address this, we need to figure out what type of poses we are going to put them in order to showcase all these gesture so-called types. Okay, so and before we do that, let's just make a little bit correction of perspective and make things a little bit more right. So the things that I wanted to correct is establish a pivot points for this table, because again, this table was drawn without use of perspective points necessarily, without guidelines. So of course it's a little bit, I don't know, lifted up from that side, and we just go into sure 100% that we are correct in our perspective before we are approach the next stages. Because again, if we will leave these mistakes right now, then these mistakes will screw the whole work, and we don't want that. So yeah, where are our perspective points? Okay, let's just make So again, we mostly talked about composition. In last stream, we established 3 main areas. Yeah, so our tertiary area, our primary area, and our secondary area, and we ensure that they are going to be overlap between each other. So second area has to overlap with the third one. Our first area has to overlap with the third one too, and this way, and of course our first one has to interact or overlap with a second area. So that way we ensure that they are all overlapping, which actually creates some type of cohesion between them, which is the whole point of any illustration. We have to create a finished and a piece which is going to look as a whole, like one, as one. Things don't have to be separated, but sometimes we could lose that by, for instance, creating an environment that doesn't seem right for the characters, or we create characters that don't seem right for the environment. And if this happens, usually this is the problem of interacting between these areas. So creating some type of interaction or contrast between these areas, or something that will help us connect these areas together. Okay, so yeah, let's just make our perspective right. Also, right now I kind of started to think how I would approach this project in the later stages when we are going to create finished sketch, and I already run into some problem which we will definitely face. The problem is, since we created this perspective grid for this small thumbnail, we somehow have to translate this perspective into this big canvas. And this is going to be definitely a problem, because again, if we want to 100% to create the same composition as we have now, we would need to place all these dots, perspective things, right where they already are. And the problem with it, since we can't choose these things and move them like all at once, the only way how we can do this is probably, so basically I don't know how we actually going to do this, but I have a couple of ideas how we are going to approach this. I guess we will come to this a little bit later, but again, we definitely need to find a way a little bit later, on later stages, how to address this composition, on how to, not composition but perspective, how to repeat this perspective in our big picture plane, because again, right now it's working for this small picture plane, and there's a bunch of problems that we are going to be addressing right there. So this is going to be approximate to the placement of the canvas itself. So if we would translate these perspective points into much bigger picture, it would definitely need to be pretty neat in terms of a placement. So we have to measure this distance between these things, and somehow create some type of guide that will allow us to translate this perspective in much more bigger canvas. But the easiest thing is going to be just to use a grid. So basically we would just could create we already created some type of a grid, but we could create this grid in much more detailed way, and using this grid we could basically kind of place these perspective points. So using this grid we would create vanishing points. This is another way to work with this, but again, I will definitely figure out what way is going to be best. For now we are going to correct our perspective for the table. So yeah, for the table specifically I created these vanishing points. So again, our main vanishing points is this one, our third one, and our second one, which is here. These two vanishing points that I created were specifically created for table, and in the end I didn't use them, so right now we are probably going to use them. The only problem, I don't have sliders that would help us to move them. because again, this actually creates a little bit of problem. I guess we just move them by hand. Okay, so let's just turn off our sketch. Where is it? So yeah. So our vanishing point for this table has to be somewhere there. So we have to remember that our horizon line is placed right here. So that means that our vanishing point has to be somewhere probably here. Let's just manually find our point, or not. Let's just turn on the assistant and let's just try to yeah, this is too far, too close to this one. Let's just put it a little bit further from our. Okay, let's check this one. Yeah, and as you see, it will create completely different angle. Of the table. It all depends on so we definitely need to place this pivot point a little bit further, because again, to create this particular angle. I think this is too extreme. Let's place it a little bit closer to our horizons, probably somewhere here. Has to be right. Yeah, this is the closest thing that we probably could get. Yeah. Again, this is much more skewed than we did previously, and I kind of knew that because it was pretty obvious that this table is not fitting this perspective. So yeah, the only thing that we need to do is just to properly place this point to ensure that so it has to be a little bit further. Now let's just check how this works. Yeah, let's just put it a little bit more. And maybe like this one. No, this is a straight one. Let's just check how it would look. I don't know. maybe a little bit more. Again, I would want this to not be that extreme. So the less extreme we were going to, so we already have some pretty extreme foreshortening here, and to balance this extreme foreshortening we need to create less extreme point here. Again, we couldn't place this point closer to this or further to this because it would definitely made our table. Or we could. Let's just test this. Let's just place this a little bit. No. If I would place this one here, this one's going to be too straight. No. Just bring it back. Okay, just go back. Just redraw them. And place again this point much further. Again, the thing about extreme angles, as I said before, in order to create a less extreme perspective and more realistic looking, we have to carefully watch how distorted objects in our perspective are. So if something creates too much of distortion, it looks unrealistic. And we need to create, if we're creating distortion, it has to be controlled. Yeah, this is probably going to work. Yeah, I like how it works. So this I will leave. So yeah, basically we established a right perspective for our table, and let's probably redraw our table to a right perspective. The only question is where to do this, either on a grid itself, or would I just, no, let's just create a different layer for it. Okay. So this is going to be our table. Again, this is one of the reasons why I chose to not go into 3D, because again, it's much more challenging to work with the perspective, of course, when you drawing it in 2D. Because again, you need to think where vanishing points are placed, you need to properly place them. This is much more challenging in terms of a studying. Of course, if you use 3D, it solves most of these problems by itself, and if you would use 3D, you would probably use it not for you have to use it for the right reasons. So in order to increase speed, probably, if you don't have that much time, but you never have to use probably 3D to basically not because you're lazy or because you don't want to understand perspective. This is not very good reason to use 3D. I'm basically using 3D for all the right reasons. First thing, usually I use 3D to study things, because again, this is an awesome instrument that kind of replace reality, because again, when we study from reality, there is too much information in reality. Reality has so much information that it's sometimes too hard to sort out all this information, choose what's important. This is one of the hardest things that comes with studying from real life, and this is probably studying from real life is more challenging, the most challenging things to study. Yeah. Okay, this is actually just, I don't know what color to use. Let's for now use white, and then we would choose change it to black by adding a invert filter. So yeah, when I'm using 3D, I usually using it for the right reasons. So either to, okay, there's in most cases 3D will help you if your scene too complex and you don't have time to figure out where every pivot point is placed. So basically, if you have like a bunch of objects that has to contain the right perspective rules, you would probably use 3D, because unless you have time. Again, if you have enough time, I think it's much more beneficial for you would be to spend a little bit of time to actually build this perspective by hand, or in 2D at least. We're not per se building it by hand, we're using guides, but again, this way we understand perspective much more because we are working with it directly. When we are using 3D, we are not working with perspective necessarily in direct way. We're still working with camera placement, with figuring out what type of lens we would choose, but again, we're not necessarily all the time thinking about perspective. We just kind of, okay, I need to find the right angle. It's somewhat like you trying to find a right angle to make a photo in reality, or shoot a video. So you basically like a director trying to operate your camera in the right direction, figure out what angle is best. You're not always necessarily think about perspective, you think more about feeling that this perspective invokes. So if you try to study the perspective itself, again, if you're not that experienced and you can't operate with perspective like manually without some type of help, outside help, that in these cases you would probably use 3D to create your scene, then like basic primitives, then you would add this scene into 2D program and then analyze this scene to understand where vanishing points are placed. That way you will actually use 3D beneficially, much more beneficially than rather just use it for not doing hard work. So yeah, every project that we create, we have to grow on this project, and the more we put into studying, the more we put into make sure that we will create this project as properly as possible, the more we learn along the way and the better we'll become in the end. Okay, so we're recreating a little bit of perspective to try to just figure out where to place things. So in terms of a table, I already said that table itself probably has to be a simple chunk of wood, simple board, and I need to figure out how to place Quintessa under this table. This is going to be a pretty hard thing to do, because again, from the beginning I planned that Quintessa is going to be under the table. This is going to be pretty challenging to depict. Okay, this is presumably our table. So right now we actually created a right perspective for this table. This is a cool which will help us to properly ensure that we place characters the right way, and etc. And also it's going to become evident where, if we would use 3D, things would be much easier. For instance, when we're going to place these chairs, this is going to be pretty challenging, because again, we would probably put these chairs in a perspective too, and it's not necessarily had to go with these pivot points and completely be the same as table. I think we will definitely change this by adding additional pivot points. Yeah. So again, I need to figure out where would I put Quintessa. So okay, let's just establish some type of place where would Quintessa be under the table. Doesn't have to be right in the center of the table, but somewhere there. So presumably Quintessa is going to be there. Funny thing that we will redraw this all over again, probably, when we are going to create like our final sketch. But again, the more we understand now, the better. So this work might seem tedious, and since we're not going to use it like directly, mostly we are going to use this type of work for it's beneficial to our imagination to imagine things inside this scene. This is like the whole reason why I'm actually doing this, to put in my imagination more information, to then use this information to build upon this information and create like complex because again, when we are complex objects and subjects, because again, when we working with form and construction, everything has to start with simple thing. We need to think about all these things as basic primitives, and then build on them more complex things. This is how things work. Yeah, this is going to be a pretty slow process, I think. Okay, let's just turn off our composition. The problem about perspective, when you actually encounter sometimes when you actually like create things using perspective, it looks worse than it would before than it was before. Like for instance, I created this table, and perspective wise it seems like in terms of rules it's the rightfully created one, so proper perspective. But this table somehow looks much more appealing. Yes, and this is actually like the problematic thing though. But again, we can't necessarily misplace this table differently, because again, this is the right angle for this table right here, and it's definitely the right angle. So why this is the right angle? Because again, in terms of a movement, I want these gestures to go to our statue. Then of course this would help us to bring our attention to this character. This line is going to bring attention to this character, and this character definitely is going to be a little bit placed a little bit differently, which would probably choose our perspective, our composition a little bit. Let's think about it. So what if I created perspective like this? This angle would be less distorted, and table would be placed like this, for instance. Because I don't want to put so I want for this character to actually overlap with our gate, and in order to do it I need to create perspective that will leave this character in this place, because again, compositionally I would rather keep this character right in this place. So I think in order to leave this character in this place, we would probably need to create a little bit different perspective for this table. So yeah, let's just make little adjustments. Okay, so let's make it a little bit closer and see. Again, we're not going to change our left point, we're only going to work with this point, because again, we need to figure out the right way to ensure that our composition is going to be the same as we created it without perspective rules. Yeah, it could work. It actually works probably much better. Again, this one is directed to our character, this one directed to this character and to our statue, this one directed to this pile, and then we will create some type of transition into here. But the problem is, in most cases, these things has to work together. So that's why we would probably we will rework this thing again and again and again until we make sure that this is a proper angle for our table, because that's why probably we're not don't have to spend that much time, because if we do and we need to rework things, yeah, it actually creates pretty extreme angle, as you see. Yeah, this is too extreme. It's not a bad thing, but again, we created this extreme angle for the specific reasons to add this tension, and as we see now, this tension actually creates too extreme angle because we are too close. If we would place this table a little bit deep into scene, we would probably get rid of this distortion. But I guess at this point we couldn't do this, because if I put our main focus and our secondary focus deeper into the scene, it's not going to be beneficial for us. First thing that will change, our table is going to be, so our tabletop is going to be less evidence. We are going to see less of things that are going to be standing on the table, which is a bad thing, because this is our secondary focus and we need to establish it properly. The same goes for these characters, and in terms of a balance, right now this is dominant because it's somehow bigger than the whole composition, because again, it creates some type of feel. It's not necessarily bigger if you would compare sizes, but again, it seems dominant. But if we would make it smaller, it definitely not going to work. Let's just show you what I'm talking about. Let's just try to choose this, try to basically make it smaller for the sake of test. Let's just save before. Yeah, for instance, if we again would make this smaller, as you see, yes, this would bring less distortion, but again, this way composition becomes less concentrated on these characters. I still want to make them our primary focus, and this way surroundings is dominating over them, but I don't want to create this. I want to create a different feeling. I don't want it to I don't want it to surroundings to dominate over them. I actually want to kind of create some type of, I don't know, equal division between domination. So they are dominating and setting is dominating too, but in other way. That way we could definitely implement the story theme that I wanted to implement here before, that these statues will come alive and presumably will attack Angry Birds when they are least prepared for. Yeah, so that's why I can't make it smaller, and that's why we need to kind of make some type of a sacrifice. Don't like to use this word, but again, let's call it like this. So we need to kind of make some type of sacrifice in terms of a angle, in terms of a distortion. So yeah, there's going to be a little bit distorted things, but only this way we could work with the things that we wanted to say. Okay, so let's just continue. So yeah, this angle probably works best for this table. Let's just try to, maybe I could place it a little bit like this. Yeah, let's just try to do that. Yeah, this is a creation process. It's not always that clear from the get-go. You need to figure out what works, what's not working. Yeah, looks better. Now this character is placed properly. Again, it's pretty extreme perspective because we're pretty close to what we're seeing now, because what? Because yeah, because we're too close to camera. This is probably going to look a little bit better than before. Oh no. You see there? This is a tangent. We need to avoid tangents with all costs. It still creates not necessarily the tangent, but again, this line is kind of visual. Yeah, could create a tangent. So we need to make it a little bit smaller. The smaller, the less height this table is going to have, the harder for us is going to be to place these right. Because again, by changing the height of the table, we definitely change the placement of our characters. They're probably going to be a little bit deeper in space than right now. For instance, this one definitely is going to be a little bit deeper, somewhere here. That's why the things actually work in cohesion. Everything works. There's no separate things. There's always things. These things in illustrations are working always as one. Okay, we're not going to think about tangents in here now. Let's just for now establish where would we place these. Now it seems again, yeah, so if we would work in 3D perspective, then we wouldn't think about these things like right now I need to think of. So again, that's why working with the real perspective, like it's much more challenging. So for instance, if we would want to establish where to properly place this stool or this chair, first we can do it by eye, but I actually want to make it properly. So that way I need to make sure that this chair is not going to be under the table. Since Bubbles sitting on this chair, it's not going to be a chair, it's going to be probably some part of a transformer, but again, we are talking about not the subjects itself, but more of what their subjects are for. So they're oh, come on. Yeah, what's the purpose of this subject? So we basically first need to think the purpose of the subject. So that's why I'm calling this chair. That's what I'm calling this a table height. I don't know. So I'm not necessarily thinking about them right now as this is going to be a quintessence. This is going to be some type of a part of the transformer, which is going to look like head or hand or some part of the mechanical part. Again, I'm not thinking about this because again we need to think about all these things as simple as possible in order to operate them properly in space. So that's where spatial relationships or spatial rules come to life. If we would work in 3D, we would not think about this that much. But when we work in 2D, we need to solve these problems. By the way, I think throughout the whole stream, our main goal is to basically find what type of problems we have and establish these problems in order to then solve them. Again, most of the streams, the most of the today's stream, maybe if I would not manage to finish this today, maybe tomorrow's stream, definitely going to be finding what problems we have and gathering this information in order to know what to look for on the next stages. Again, as I told before, as I said before, we need to understand what we are looking for. And this is like the broad thing. We need to understand what we're looking for in terms of a gesture. We need to understand what we're looking for in terms of a construction, in terms of design, in terms of composition. So basically this stage is the most crucial stage for our progress and for our project as a whole. So the more time we spend on this stage, the less work we need to do on later stages, and this is going to be much easier. So the last stages are going to be easier for us in terms of their realization, because we will spend time on these simple things. Because again, if you compare, I would rather spend, so what you would choose, to spend time to work with primitives and redraw cubes in order to figure out where to place objects properly, or you would spend countless hours to redraw the whole thing to place it properly. So of course a much more beneficial and much more efficient thing is to redraw a bunch of cubes to understand where they're placing, to figure out their placement, than to redraw the whole thing when we already will finish it in terms of a design. So redraw the whole design, or redraw some type of a, I don't know, future representation of this design, much more simplified version of it. Of course, simplified version, to redraw in simplified version in order to understand where to place it properly, it's much more efficient in terms of a time spending and time management. So that's why we would need to spend more time on these things now. It seems like pointless in somehow, but again, if you know why you're doing it, why you are doing it, and I think you will see how it's going to be actually beneficial in the future. So again, just bear with me. This is definitely will help us. Like, I'm 100% sure about it. Okay, so I'll just continue. So again, if we would try to place this stool or chair right here, we would need to figure out where this table ends. And in order to do that, we would actually need to create, I think we will need to use this perspective. So we need to compare the height of this thing and translate the height of this thing right here in order to figure out where it ends, where it will end. Then we need to translate this right here and right here, and then we need to create, well, come on. So it's just an example. This is not per se the right way, but again, we need to understand I was wrong, so let's just remake this thing, redraw this thing. So how we would translate the height of this table to here, to understand where to properly place our chairs to not overlap with this line. So basically they need to be placed a little bit. I don't think they need to be placed inside the nah, I don't know. Let's just figure out this. Let's just delete this one for now. So yeah, for most of these things, I actually can't find the proper description, because again, I'm doing this for the first time. Like these crazy perspective things. I usually draw, if I work with perspective, I work with it not that detailed, in not that detailed way. Again, since Quintessa under the table is going to be placed not necessarily the proper way, she's not going to be right in the center, the parts of her body is going to be asymmetric, she's not going to be like the pure cube, or so she's not going to have like equal sizes from both of her sides of her body. I think the problem that I not established the size of the Quintessa itself compared to our Angry Birds. I would probably make her head this actually creates a bit of a problem. I know that the Quintessa is not that big as the Transformers itself. Again, like Transformers is like crazy big, and she is probably twice human size. I don't know. Yeah, she probably maybe twice of the human size. That means that these transformer parts are going to be pretty big, and Quintessa has to be moderately slow. Slow? No, small. The Angry Birds are going to be pretty big compared to Quintessa. Yeah, they're going to be much bigger than Quintessa, at least this one, the big one. It's kind of going to create a bit of a problem with proportions but again, this is our rules. At this point, since there were no so no, I don't think that someone's actually before meshed these so-called universes together, so the Transformers universe and Angry Birds universe in one place, because they're not necessarily fit, and that's why the proportions that we are going to establish are going to be our own proportions. We're not necessarily have to strict to some type of realistic proportions, because again, these are both worlds that were created from imagination, and they have their own proportions. So we could assume that Angry Birds are much bigger proportionally than some of the transformers. And again, we all know that transformers could be big ones. There's a small ones out there too. So yeah, that means that we will definitely create some type of a balance here. Again, if it would be our personal projects, not like Fanart, I think I would definitely spend a little bit more time on establishing proportions of all things in order to compare them properly. Right now, again, since this is Fanart, I'm not necessarily want to spend time on these things because again, they're not that important. Because again, this is Fanart. The whole thing about this is to actually translate the whole idea and showcase it the proper way. And by spending too much time on technical stuff, we would probably, I don't know, it's not going to be something that will be evident for other people, I think. The whole thing about creating every type of work, we basically as artists, we create things, we need to create things for the audience to not how do you properly say it? Come on, turn on your brain, man. So we're not necessarily creating. So all things that we as artists actually create, we have to create for a viewer to not notice. So the less noticeable thing is, in terms of a proportions, in terms of a composition. So the whole thing is to create a feeling or tell a story. And if some of the technical stuff is disrupting this story or distracting from this story, that's where we actually made something wrong. So I don't think that these comparable proportions would necessarily be noticed by viewers. They could, but even if they could, they're not going to think about them too much because again, these two words are separate. They're not something that you would mesh up on a constant basis. They're too different. So no one probably in their own minds comparing in like, oh, how what difference in proportions and size between Angry Birds and Transformers. So since most of the people, I think, didn't thought about that much, it's not going to be destructive. So people are not going to be don't notice these things. So people noticing and viewers noticing only things that they are familiar with and the things that they kind of measure and see on a constant basis. That's why when we work with the human bodies and creating proportions inside of this human body, creating facial proportions and etc., and relation to human proportions in relation to proportions of real objects and subjects and other subjects. In these cases, they will probably notice it, and we would spend much more time to trying to figure out proportions between all of these things. But again, since we are working with worlds that are not constantly comparable, that means that it's not going to be noticed that much. The only thing that could the difference in proportions between Transformers and Angry Birds, the only questions that it could kind of bring up is to some viewers could start to ask this question: what's actually the size difference between Transformers and Angry Birds, because now they are seeing like example how it could be, and either it's going to be the first example, which is going to be the ground example from where people will compare these notions from now on, or this is going to be something additional to their current understanding. Oh, I think this is definitely was confusing. I hope not, but again, it's pretty hard to formulate thoughts on this subject. I will definitely need to get more experience in this. So again, let's just continue. So yeah, we need to establish basically where we would place our chairs in compared to spatial relationships between table and chairs. That way we will know where to place the characters. So let's work on it. So again, in order to figure out where actually things are placed, we need to use some type of a construction lines to make it properly, and figure out by these construction lines where table would end. So yeah, this is where actually table is going to end, and where let's just make it a little bit less evident to showcase that these are construction lines. Cool thing, we don't need to spend time to figure out where these things are in the future, I think, because it would be enough to just redraw these primitives and then build on top of these primitives. But for now, since we are establishing their placement, we need to figure out this again at this earlier stage. So the same for this. In order to understand where is going to be the end for this one, for this part of the table. Oh, yeah, I need to turn on the assistant. We are just creating these turn off the assistant and make this a guide. Just establish the point. Yeah, again, this is pretty skewed table, pretty distorted one, but again, it's enough for us to place all our things right on this table, and it actually will create pretty interesting way of arranging things. We are going to arrange them, of course, later after we establish final table placement and the placement of chairs. And of course, when we're placing chairs, we need to think about how these chairs would where these chairs would placed to not overlap and to not create tangents. So yeah. Okay, so it would be much better if I draw these a different color, but again, I think this is not that necessary. And of course, now if we need to figure out where the angles are placed, we need to, let's just save this. We need to create this line and basically continue this line. And this line. Using this, we actually establish where this table is going to place. And again, let's make this yeah, this table looks pretty crazy, which is a cool thing. This distortion that's created by our third point perspective, or third pivot point, it actually beneficial to us. Yeah, it's actually pretty beneficial because, as I said before, we need to show that Angry Birds organized party in their own way, in their own specific way, a little bit crazy, a little bit of anger or here and there. So this actually creates character to the table. So distortion actually helps us to add this to our table, which is a cool thing. Okay, what's next? The hardest thing to actually figure out is something that's outside of our vision. For instance, we're not seeing our table, so we're not seeing through this table. We're not seeing through this table, so we don't know where exactly this table ends, where it starts. Like you see, there's some perspective problems there, because I probably not established it well. Yes, right here. But then it has to be here and here. Just make our table a little bit smaller. I think this is. The problem with building perspective, usually there's too much lines, and sometimes it's harder to understand where what line is. For that, we usually use dotted lines of some kind to create the feeling of see-through. Again, the reason why we need to establish this one is to properly place our chair on which bomb will be sitting. Again, if we would use 3D, we would just basically rotate this camera around, place our chair whatever we want, compare it to this table, and rotate it around, or just turn on the camera and we already would see the finished result. But again, it's not that challenging in terms of like building a perspective and learning to understand it practical way. Again, I understand perspective on the like knowledge basis, but not everything is that evident in practice. So when you kind of get into practice, you're starting to realize that some things that you are actually understand, you're not necessarily understand them pretty well in particular situations, because again, perspective is crazy. There's a bunch of situations where things don't seem right and perspective doesn't work as it should work, probably. And usually when it happens, this is a problem of distortion, this is a problem of pivot point placements, and etc. So or you just don't understand how these things work, and you need to kind of get a little bit more detailed grasp on things, how they work. Yeah. Let's just create small line to showcase where our under the table thing ends. Yeah, as you see, actually this thing has to be a little bit further away, further deep into space. So yeah, this is our table stand, which is going to be Quintessa's head. Let's make this. Oh no, we actually see in this. Yeah, we need to erase only things that we don't see. This one we actually see. So now we established some type of restrictions where we could and where we couldn't place our chairs and how far we need to place our characters there. So let's just try to create now to properly place our chairs. Well, this is one of the biggest reasons why I actually kind of struggled between what to choose. Choose to work with a like perspective like this and make all this tedious process when you building construction lines, figure out where things placed. It's crazy tedious for the viewer to watch. This is kind of cool for me because again, I'm kind of happy to do this thing because whatever I'm drawing, whatever I'm creating, I'm happy about it because I like the process by itself. So for me, this is actually a pretty fun thing to do. But again, for the viewer, it's not necessarily the best thing to watch. But again, I want to create like full experience, and I don't want to like hide tedious things from you because I actually want you to understand how sometimes tedious this process could be, and you actually have to love this process in order to have good feelings toward this process and actually like what you're doing and love what you're doing. So you need to at some point probably kind of starting to establish some love for this process. It's not always the case. Sometimes no matter how you actually trying, how hard you're trying, in the end you never like working with this type of things. So again, it's depending probably on a person. Some people like this type of stuff, some people just want to skip to fun things, to fun stuff. And again, building perspective is not necessarily a fun thing, it's more technical thing than fun. But again, if you view it from the right angle, it can become fun. And I'm trying to look at this, that this is the one of the crucial fundamentals in order to actually make fun work. Because again, what makes fun when we are working? The process itself, if this process is pretty easy, yes, it makes it much more fun. But the real things that actually make process fun, when you actually make something and you how do you properly say it? Okay, let's just, how do you properly address it? Let's find a right word and phrase. So what actually in reality kind of makes you feel happy about process is when you actually accomplish things that you intended to accomplish. So if you would spend time, if you wouldn't spend time on perspective, then you would probably did not accomplish things later. So again, it all depends on your experience and what's yeah, so the more experienced you are, the probably less problems you will face in the later stages. But again, the problem here that, oh, we actually kind of need to think about the size of these chairs compared to our characters. This is one of the things that we definitely need to address. Come on, you're serious? This is going to be that distorted? I don't believe this. Something's not right about this chair. Okay, we will go back to this chair a little bit later. I'm not necessarily like how it's distorted. It's too unrealistic. So yeah, for me at least, things that actually give me a joy while creating is when I am actually accomplishing things that I intended to. So for instance, when I'm struggling but I don't know what to do, what I'm doing, and when I'm doing things, redrawing things constantly and they're not working, this is definitely not necessarily the thing that makes me happy. And I don't think that there's a people who actually enjoy when they're not doing well in drawing. So in order to do well in drawing and actually understand and what you're doing, and yeah, these type of things, you need to probably understand how things work, because again, when I am understanding how things work, it helps me to build much more realistic things from the first try, or not maybe from the first try, but again, in the end I will draw them properly, and when I'm doing this, I'm actually enjoying myself. So again, if you want to enjoy your process, I think you need to view this process in particular way. And again, for me, I'm enjoying my process when this process is controlled. Come on, what's happening with this chair? It doesn't have to be that crazy. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we need to establish different pivot point for this chair. As you see, if we try to use this pivot point and further pivot point to create this chair, it looks horrible. Yep. So we need to actually create a chair using different pivot points. this is just a test. I'm not going to leave this. I just wanted to, come on, this is strange. By the way, if I would face some problem that I can't solve perspective wise, then I would probably address 3D to kind of see where I'm mistaken, so what I don't understand. So that's why 3D is a good thing to study. So right now, for instance, I'm kind of struggling with placing this chair properly because, again, this current perspective is not working for this chair. If I would make this chair using our main perspective, then it would look pretty strangely. I don't know, looks like out of place. It still works, but it looks out of place. And for instance, if I can't solve this perspective by hand, I will definitely address 3D to understand why I'm struggling. No, it's not working. That's why sometimes you would actually, instead of working with perspective, oh, screw perspective, let's just draw it by hand. Yeah, and that's it. And this looks pretty normal. But again, this is problematic. But this wouldn't be right, because this thing has to be worked with this type of perspective, so it has to be distorted. So we need to find a way to showcase proper distortion. We definitely can't avoid distortion in this part of the picture, because it's pretty close to the edge of the picture plane. That means that, yeah, I think I will address this later. And also placing this one, I think we would need to place it a little bit differently too. So let's just delete this one. Again, we established where this chair is not going to go further, so it's limitations, and after we establish limitations, now we can work with understanding the proper angle for this table, chair, not table. Okay, so okay. So, do I actually need to create for every stool or for every chair separate pivot point? I think I am. I think I actually need to do that. Okay, let's just do that. Why not? It definitely will take some time. But again, I don't know, let's just place it right here and just test how this looks. So no assistant. Hello, assistant. So what if we would place table our chair right here, like this? Yeah, you see the problem? It looks like this chair is floating. And this is a problem, somehow has to be... Oh! I'm not drawing it properly. Yes, think I'm using wrong perspective points for this. Still seem not right. Does not seem right at all. What are we going to do? So yeah, that's why the working with a proper perspective is sometimes more challenging than drawing by eye, because again, if you just draw by eye, it's like you're drawing by eye, well, that's it. Draw how it feels right to you, and then adjust this to perspective. But when you're trying to work like with strict perspective rules applied from the get-go, it actually creates a bit of a problem. But again, we will manage through it, I think, definitely. As long as we're learning, everything is okay. We need to practice, learn, gain experience. Oh yeah, it does actually seem a little bit cooler. Looks much cooler. So what I'm doing now, I just want to establish how would these things would placed. I kind of figured out that I didn't went on a break. I think we need to take a break. Let's just kind of finish on something. So yeah, I don't know about this angle actually. It looks pretty wrong to me, but in terms of a perspective, it looks right. It has to look right, but it's pretty distorted. And it has to be distorted. Like, look, come on. All these things going to be distorted. Probably one of the reasons why it looks that way, and I'm thinking that it's wrong because I have like composition that actually distracts me from it. And if I turn off the composition and just leave right perspective grid, then it seems less wrong. It still seems a little bit wrong, but it seemed less wrong than before. Oh, wait a minute. We have a floor. That's why. So we have this floor, and our chair basically stands because again, if we don't place all these things properly, then we will run into problems where we go into work with understanding where to put lights and where the shadows are, how to build our cast shadows, and etc. So everything right here has a point, and if I don't spend time on this, I will definitely struggle with understanding where to place properly cast shadows, where to place shadows itself, where these objects are connected to the surface. So basically their relation with surface and etc. So that's why it's crazy important to figure out these things. So yeah, I think we will spend much more time on this than I anticipated, unfortunately. But this is a part of a process. We need to do that. So yeah, we will stay positive on it, I think, either way. So okay. So yeah, after a break, I will figure out the proper way to place our chairs. And I think to make the stream a little bit more interesting and less confusing, I think I will definitely address 3D to solve this problem or to understand this problem better. Because again, no matter how would I right now spend, how much time I would spend on this, I would definitely not. In the end, I would probably, if I would spend like 4, 5, 6 more or 8 hours, I would definitely figure it out in the end. But we don't have that much time to do that while streaming. So in order to make this painful, to not make this more painful than it already is for the viewers, I think it's better if we address perspective in 3D and try to figure out how to put this thing in 3D and create this type of angle, create all these things in order to properly know where to place these chairs the right way. And after doing this, we will know better, and we will actually analyze perspective using 3D, and we'll understand how better we would place them. And we will understand why this distortion is happening and why it looks so bad. So no, I know why this distortion is happening because of this angle, but again, I need to see if this is the right thing or I'm doing something wrong. So I need some type of a comparison. Usually, if you have some type of a mentor would tell you what you're doing wrong. Since we don't have a mentor, we kind of have to mentor ourselves, and 3D is the best tool to do that. That's one of the reasons why I kind of using 3D as a mentor, as the instrument of self-mentoring, if you could say it like this. So yeah, let's just leave it at this for now, and after a quick break I will go into 3D and I will actually try to create some. Yeah, this is going to be our first stream that will actually consist 3D in it, which is going to be, I guess, pretty cool. So yeah, see you in a minute. So we're our break layer. We'll be back in a minute. So yeah, let's just go in a quick break. See you in a bit. Yep. So let's continue. So if we will address all these things in 3D, it's definitely going to be not less challenging that it already is, but at least we are going to get our answer that we are looking for. So again, right now the biggest problem that I can't figure out is how to properly place this chair for it to look it not wrong. So no matter what type of perspective I'm choosing it, no matter what type of angle I'm choosing it, it doesn't seem wrong to me. So before I will continue to try to put this in different angles, I need to figure out what I'm doing wrong before that. So what I'm going to do right now is I will try to basically use this and put it into 3D and try to replicate this scene into 3D by using all these things. It's going to be a pretty hard thing to do because I never worked this way, because we need to create in 3D the same placement as here, and this is going to be a pretty hard thing to do. But we not necessarily have to create like close proximity of a replica of what we are seeing right now, but if we do that, it would be awesome, because again, it would be the best way to analyze our current perspective and place properly all things on the table and whatever. So this way, because again, we need to solve a bunch of problems in terms of perspective before we will go to the next stages. For instance, we need to understand how to place these plates properly, so that they look properly in terms of a perspective distortion. So we need to understand how distortion will affect these plates, which will be right here. It's not going to be that hard though, and probably drawing by hand going to be pretty easy, because again, if we want to create plate, we're just creating this one. Yeah, we're just creating this one, then we are basically creating a oval inside of it, or it's not that hard in terms of a construction, but still, if we will have something to go to, if we would stumble upon some type of problem, instead of spending countless times to find a solution right here, we would probably find solution there, and that way, by analyzing that solution, we would learn how to implement this thing here. So it's like two ways of learning. I don't know, you learn by constructing perspective manually, and then you use in 3D to analyze this perspective. Yeah. So what we're going to do first is we're going to save. Then we need to understand what things are important for us to put them into 3D. One of the important things, of course, is the construction lines. So we probably would get rid of our background. Also, we need to make our table darker, because right now we don't see it. To make this, the easiest way is to add a filter mask, put invert on this mask, and this way it makes our table, as you see, the right color. So inverting it from white to black. Yeah, so now we have guidelines, basic guidelines. Now we will go into perspective by trying to replicate these guidelines. The first thing that we are going to do, I think we need to establish some type of a ground comparisons to our perspective in 3D. That means that we are going to create these walls, ceiling. So basically we will create some type of environment inside 3D by using some basic primitives. And also this is going to be the first thing that we are going to kind of aim our goal to and towards. And after we'll finish with this, we will go through the table placement. And after we establish all these things, table placement and the placement of the background itself in 3D, by placement I mean in relation to camera, then we will definitely can experiment with chairs. So yes, and this way we actually will this is going to be a good thing to check if I did this thing right. Okay, so how we're going to do this? Again, I already saved everything that we needed, so let's just simply crop this thing. We would better make it okay, I know how to do this. So let's just make it, we need to leave HD size as we created before. Yeah, this is not it. So hop and hop. Nope. 8. So yeah, then we will just lock these things. What? Oh yeah, we made 20. Come on, man. Work with me. Work with me, cropping tool. Come on. I'm not using usually cropping tool that much. That's why it's kinda little bit hard. So yeah, now we can, by changing the ratio, no, not ratio, what we need to change to lock the aspect ratio. No, I think there is a way to make it smaller. Yeah. So yeah, we need to establish an aspect ratio, and after we establish aspect ratio, we're just going to change the size itself. So yeah, we need to lock out a ratio instead of sizes. Okay, so no, let's just for now lock this down. 20. For some reason it doesn't lock. And 180. So then we are locking this one. For some reason it didn't lock properly. Lock. And then the wrong way. Unlock. Do thing. One. Oh, come on. This is funny. I'm struggling with cropping tool. Seriously? Okay, come on, lock it down right way. Finally, it locked it. So yeah, the reason why I'm doing it is because when we are going to create a camera, we need to make this camera the same size as we have our project. So that's why I needed to put this aspect ratio the right way. So yeah, this makes it right, so we just save it. No, we just crop it. Then we export it. Let's just export it right here in documents. How we would do this? Let's just take a PNG and call it perspective. Save with the highest compression, because with this it's going to be bad quality. Everything is down, yeah. And then we just go back. I don't know if we need to go outside of this program, or the Blender, it's not that resource-based program, so I don't think that it will create too much problems. Yeah, let's just not go into exit from this program. Let's just stay in Krita and go to Blender, or not. I don't know, that's a question. Yeah, let's just go to Blender right away. So as you might see, when we work with Blender, layout a little bit different, because Blender has different layout. Okay, it's opening on a different monitor. I will definitely why it launching so, yeah. So hello Blender. So this is a Blender. So what we're going to do in Blender in particular, so again, the first thing we need to do is create a camera. Again, I did not work in Blender a long time, so it's going to be a little bit of remembering where things are and how to work with them, but eventually we will make things right. Okay, first thing that we need to do is, I guess, to create a, let's just make a plane. Where the plane is, stack mesh, cube, plane. Then we scale this plane. By the way, let's turn on screencast. Yes, I will be pushing buttons. I wanted these buttons to display, so we don't need this one, I think. So yeah, we're creating a ground plane. This is more than enough. So let's just turn off auto keying because it already so first thing I think that we need to kind of establish is where the edges. Constricted to Z axis. Go. So supposedly our ceiling is pretty big. Tools and insert face. Nope. Something different. Don't remember what exactly. Make face, yeah. So yeah, we don't need to extrude that. So yeah, basically now we kind of created a space. So yeah, this is going to be much longer, of course, much more longer. Yes, and this is going to be our let's just open our perspective thing in order to see how it's working. Okay, this one has to be a little bit, not a little bit, but much more. Much lower, something like this. And probably the whole thing has to be bigger. Yeah, now it's time to place camera in order to figure out the right way to do these things. Where we would place the camera. Where is the camera? I don't remember where the camera was. It? Yeah, right here. Then of course, if we would go to the camera, we're seeing pretty strange cube. For that, we need to change our resolution. Let's change our resolution to 9020 to 1080. 1080p. Just make this 100. Okay. Now we need to properly place out our camera. For that, we will go to lock camera to view, and now we are going to operate our camera to make this properly. So as you see now, perspective is pretty strange. When we work with 3D, perspective is controlled with the camera lens. So right now we actually work with, funny thing, we actually work with the normal perspective. I actually thought that this is orthographic thing. Nope, we work with a normal perspective. Since we have pretty distorted perspective, camera somewhere here. Yeah, it's going to be pretty challenging to do, to understand the right angle. The best way, I guess, for us would be to somehow project our picture into our camera and then placed it right. But the problem is I don't necessarily know how to do it. So I know what I want, but I actually don't know how to do it because I don't think that Blender could do this. I'm sure some way I think we need to, we have to, we may, somehow I think we could do this, but I don't know how. Okay, so yeah, we actually have pretty distorted perspective. So it's probably okay. Right away I'm seeing some problems with size. It's like something like this, but much higher. It actually would be cool if we had some type of an overlay of this on that, but we don't have one, and I don't think that we actually can create one. Again, since we're creating our own this is one of the kind of craziest thing when you try to mesh 3D with 2D, so you need to know how to do this. And again, I don't so I know how to work like in reverse, how to work first things in 3D and then put and analyze them in 2D analyze them in 2D. This is again pretty easy for everyone to do, but to make an opposite thing, it's much more challenging. Again, for instance, okay, I established perspective and I want to make the same perspective as I did like manually and do this with automatic thing, so in 3D. And the problem with this is pretty challenging because you don't have like horizon line right here to be depicted, and so you basically don't have anything in terms of the instruments to make this right. The only thing that you have is your eye, and doing this by eye is crazy hard. I don't think that I will manage to do this by eye. Let's just make our angle much more obscure. So right here we actually can see somewhere here there is display of for some reason there is no display. Maybe group preferences? Nope. Fade out, size, yeah, display and nope, not display. Item. So basically somewhere we would need to find information about what type of angle we're using for the viewport itself. Don't actually remember where is this. Somewhere right here, but I don't see it. In items there's nothing here. Oh yeah, come on, let's stop it. So as we see right now, we work with a 45 lens. That means that we probably would to make the same right here. I'm not sure what type of thing we need to change, either field of view, either the sensor. We will figure out that what actually needs to be done, what needs to be changed. Okay, definitely not field of view. It definitely has to be a sensor. Let's put it on standard 35, because this one not working. Yeah, sensor has to be on 45. And focal length on 35. This way we display something closer to what we see on right here on viewport, because this is the closest thing probably to this. Not necessarily the closest, but pretty close. It seemed like our camera is actually right on the ground, but it's not. Which actually creates a bit of a problem. Okay. How we could approach this properly? Why there's no option to... We can focus camera on plane if we would properly place this plane. Maybe this is the way to do this. Let's just think. What if I, for instance, draw a plane here and then focus this camera on that plane in the particular angle? Let's try this. Can I have a little bit of idea? Let's just explore this idea. It might work. It might not. Let's just check. If it will work, it's going to be pretty awesome. So let's just go out of the camera mode for now. Let's change. Somewhere there I actually created a plane, but I guess I'm not. Plane, where are you? Or let's just rather use placement. So there is a image as planes. We just go to our documents, we choose our perspective thing. Now we need to see what's on this plane. Need to go to materials or textures. Let's just go to textures much more. So now we see in front of our eyes what we need to do. So the whole idea is to place this thing right in front of our camera and make this some type of a guide for us to place it in perspective. Again, the whole reason why I wanted to do this, I need to translate perspective that I created manually into 3D perspective in order to understand what I did wrong in manual perspective when I placed chairs. So basically we need to create a guide for ourselves, and even creating personal guides is challenging. Let's make sure that rotations are right. 90. And then we could go to the camera. We could focus on plane, no, on perspective. And this object is called perspective. But for some reason, camera is not doing it. Why? It has to. Just going to be focusing on it, not necessarily. There is a function to put camera, align camera view to object, something like this. Set active object as a camera. Nope. Definitely not it. Yeah, align active camera to selected. This is closer, but still the camera placement is wrong. And one problem about viewport, we can't create it transparent. So we can't make it transparent this way. We could if we would render it. But since we are not going to render it because it's going to be pretty resource depending. Okay. Whew. This is a hard thing to do. Maybe we need to place camera. No, this is not camera. Okay, let's just work with the camera placement. Maybe we need much more static camera placement because it's pretty random. Okay, 90 here, 90 here. Then we need to place it in a center. Then we need to draw it back here, place it here. This one has to be in the center too. We have to do the same for this one, because they have to be placed right before each other in order for this thing to work, I think. Now if I use this function, it could work. Nope, not this. because we need to select this one. Yeah, so oh, come on. So yeah, we unlock the camera. So now camera is looking right on our picture. So the whole picture is actually now can be the thing that we can use to work with it. So let's just try. Since in most cases we see, oh no, in this case we not see through it. How we could make this see through? Okay, choose this object, go to right here and try to, oh, we didn't choose the right one. Wires, solid, textured, object color, X-ray. Oh yeah, we need to make this one X-ray. This way we will see what we're doing. It's going to be pretty confusing, but this is probably the only way to do this. Let's just save it, I think, this project, because I think we will work on it more. We go to the documents, and let's just, for now, going to save everything here. So this is our DA mashup. Or now this is a Blender file. Okay, so now we need to actually choose these. Try to place them right where we need them. Now this actually could work. Not even could, I think this will work. The only problem here is the camera. So first we need to work with the placement, with the spatial placement, and then we will make this about camera, because again there's two factors that work with this. First one is placement of the object, and second one is the camera lens, and we need to somehow like make this into 3D proper way. Okay. So again, we're choosing this one, choosing vertices for now. Oh, let's just choose edges. Oh, cool thing that we see them here. Because again, right now we are restricted by this picture plane. That's why we don't see what we're choosing, but this right here we're actually seeing it, which is a cool thing. And then we just can extend it. Let's extrude it by Z axis and let's push it further. Okay, we don't see things, which is a not good thing. Yeah, this is going to be challenging. How? know how to make this work. I think the only way to make this work is to make this transparent. And the only way to make this one transparent is to, in the render mode, it's going to be, yeah, let's just try to make it transparent. Probably we could do so. So for this we would need to use nodes. Where is our node editor? Go to the materials. And basically in our node editor, I think we need to create just add. I forget how to add things here. Yeah, no, this is switch type, adding, yeah, adding this one. So we are adding shader and we need to add transparency. We just basically need to make it transparent. Don't remember what it is. Mix shader. Let's just try this. If they work, cool. If they are not, we'll find a way. So yeah, basically I need to make it transparent. It's somewhat transparent, but not. Let's change them. Change the outputs probably. Yeah, this makes it transparent. Yeah, it still looks a bit strange. And complete white here. And complete white here. Nope, not complete white. Rup. Put this as an alpha and put this one as a color. It's somewhat working, but not fully. But still, this way we see a little bit more. Yeah, we need to change it's pretty hard on resources. First, let's disable here X-ray mode. Try it again. X-ray mode. No, it's not. So yeah, as you see, I stumble on problems along the way. I think I would probably make this outside of the stream because this is not like something that I would usually do. In reality, I kind of need to already know how to do these things, but I don't. So these type of processes, when you're trying to figure out some new type of instruments, it's not always a good thing to showcase on streams. So then again, it could take me like countless hours to do this properly and figure out what to do and how to do it. So if I'm not going to figure out this in this stream, I will definitely figure out this till tomorrow's stream, and I will start tomorrow's stream with explanation how I did this. But for now, I think since we can't go next without understanding these things, can't do much. So I would probably just have to continue trying to figure out these things. Okay, let's just close Krita. I don't think that we need it for now. I always could. So again, as we see now, we stumble upon a bunch of problems, and one of the problems we need to translate 2D perspective that we already showcased into 3D and make this the proper way to see where we made a mistake. Where actually I made a mistake, but again, I like to think that we are together in that, not just making mistakes but creating everything. Okay, so brimba, forget you, pow. Yeah, that was a think what I could do. So as you see, we seen something right here, but it's not like that evident. So mix shader has to have some type of controller, or this is not a mix shader. Some type of shader actually have a controller which allows you make in between cuts. I don't remember what type of controller, how this is actually works. Because we need to control this transparency. Maybe I just need to like strictly use a transparent object and that's it, without the fused one. And then somehow control its surface. Let's go to the material. Yeah, first is a mix shader, and then yeah, this way we could control its transparency. We actually can control its transparency even in material state. We don't have to go through the rendering state. Awesome. Cool. So yeah, I figured out how to do this, which is a cool thing. So but again, I added mix shader. Why it didn't show this before? Now it shows. So yeah, basically I kind of make this transparent, which is cool, half transparent. Now we actually know, we actually have a possibility to make this right. Again, in order to make this right, we need to keep in mind two things. First is the object itself, so the placement of object itself, and with the object. Okay, we need to move whole object. Oh, it's transparent only when we choose it. It's not transparent all the way through. In render mode, it still creates strange artifacts. Oh, it's not an artifact. It's because we don't have a light source. We don't have any light sources. But still, we couldn't work with the render mode and replace things properly, because again, we would need to use this one. That's going to be not that cool. So yeah, let's just work with this. So yeah, let's just try to do it like this. I think we don't have that much choice. Let's just go to the X-ray mode again. Just try to switch between two. This is pretty long hallway. Yeah. Like, it's even longer? This is where the difference between what you're drawing in perspective there and what you're actually imagining in reality is differs. Because again, when I draw this right here, I kind of picture it this one way. Now, when I'm trying to implement this in 3D, I'm actually kind of picturing it the other way. And that's why sometimes it's a good thing to mesh with these two things, like 3D and 2D, and understand like difference between them, because it will definitely help with your spatial awareness, like in terms of artistic spatial awareness. It would help you to understand how objects and things are placed, where they placed, and etc. So these things are actually pretty beneficial, but again, it's a hard thing to do, as almost all things. How we could do this right? Why Blender doesn't have its own perspective tool? Come on. That would be cool if we actually established horizon line. We don't have one here though. Established. Probably horizon line somewhere here. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, somewhere here. Yeah, this is a struggle. Definitely, I don't know how to properly approach this to make it right. Because again, this is the two factors that I'm actually battling now: is placement of the the angle, the lens of the camera itself, and this thing, and I can't find a way to make these. So I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm torn between them, and that's why I'm kind of struggling. Okay, let's just work with each one by one. Check. this one definitely has to be much further, but not necessarily. It actually can be changed by a camera. Which is the problem, which is the whole problem that I'm having. Like, as you see, it definitely changes this one too. We always can realign view to selected. It's not a problematic thing to do, but still, like, it has to be somewhere here. This is actually pretty close, but oh, our camera is actually not looking straight. Our camera is a little bit tilted, or not. Yes, so this is the center of our camera and it looks straight, but our straight horizon line is actually here. So that means that no, this is actually a proper way to depicting it, but what is the problem? What is the problem? Okay, just make it a little bit bigger or longer. Like, I in million years wouldn't imagine that this corridor would be that big, this space. Again, when you're working with this, it seems like it's pretty close, but when you're trying to create like the real perspective, you actually can create interesting illusions, and like, it's pretty eye-opening thing though, and it helps you to understand how to actually manipulate these things, because again, when you're comparing these two in terms of perspective, how would I implement a third angle perspective in here though? I told before that the only reason to implement a third point perspective in 3D is to using a change in the not focal length itself, but this is the biggest size, sensor size. But still, these are, for some reason, straight. They don't have to be. They have to be tilted. I already created tilting in 3D. For some reason, it's not working here. I need to figure out why. What I'm doing wrong. Let's just figure out what I am doing wrong. Let's just figure out what am I doing wrong. Nope. Okay, let's just try to work with the camera setups, standard ones. But still, it doesn't create any tilt right here. It has to. because this is imitating this distortion is the most important thing for us at this point. Yeah, we could add compositional things right here. Golden ratio, golden triangles. Yeah, we will probably leave it this. Or no, let's just get rid of it to not. Okay, this thing is not working because it's for the different reasons. Size of the sensor, vertical, horizontal, clipping, not this one. I just try to figure out to move things and try to figure out why. Oh, this thing kind of creates a little bit of tilt, I think. Okay, where our camera actually is, our camera is right here. Okay, just get rid of the tilt. So let's just try to imagine where our camera is actually placed. I think it's someone's looking a little bit down on our character, so probably the camera itself has to be much higher. Let's make this one higher too, because they work together. They work together. Maybe this one has to touch the ground. That's going to be a right thing to do. Yeah. Every time when you're doing something for the first time, it's like you're lost in the forest and you can find a way out, and the only thing that you see is a bunch of trees and no lights and no anything, and sometimes it seems like it while you're working on these things you're trying to stop and think and kind of figure out what you're doing, and it's not always working. So I think this thing has to actually touch our walls somehow, like this. This is going to be the first step how we would probably approach this, because if it's touching these walls, this is a cool thing. Second thing that we could do is actually to make this the particular size of this thing. Let's just try to do this. Maybe it will work. It's a pretty interesting methodology to use. It on. So what I wanted to do is just to make this fit this one, not in terms of a height, but in terms of a, this way I could actually figure out things. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe we need to kind of establish this perspective lines. Yeah. Why would I not think about it before? Okay, let's just go to faces. I don't know if it's chosen or not. Yeah, now it is. So now basically I need to place this one right in this line, and it has to lead me to proper place. We'll do the same for this one. And put it this way. So this way we know where they are actually beginning. The only thing that we need to establish now is how to put like the end of the plane right there. For that, I think I need to create, of course this is not the right thing to do. It actually kind of distorted the whole thing. Oh no, we destroyed our cube. When I did it. Okay, nope. So this is our height. Let's just put it on 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, to make this equal, because I messed up the size. It still needs to be like the same size from both ends. Okay, now, yeah, what I wanted to do is just to create plane here to make it a little bit easier for us to work. Make plane. Now if we try to move this, no, not this, but why is that moving? Moving, and let's just restrict it to z-axis. Go to not z but x. Come on, work. Why you're not working? Okay, move, and then x. This way I make it bigger. Yes. But I'm still don't see it. Why? Let's turn off this. No, as it. Oh, that's probably because the camera is limited by the end. Yeah. So let's just put a much more bigger limit. With the clipping limit. Yeah, now we have pretty big clipping limit, and with this we finally could make it right. Okay, so just go back to things that we were hiding. Why it's not showing? Where perspective go? Where our perspective? Come on! Where'd it gone? It's right here, but we don't see it. Why? What's happening today? Like, really? Everything is kind of vanishing somewhere. Where is it? Definitely not in any of these layers. Nope. It's still here. Didn't delete it. At least as an object. Or maybe I did delete it, but kind of. But no, I didn't. But where is it? So again, I'm choosing it. It's supposed to be viewable, but we don't see it for some reason. Maybe I did something. Solid, wire, solid, X-ray. Yeah, by adding X-ray, it's starting to show up, but come on. Oh! Yeah, it's not showing because of X-ray. Oh, come on! That was stupid. Yeah, because this one was an X-ray mode, I basically didn't see this because before I see it because there was a hole right there, but since I closed this hole by putting there a polygon, now I'm not seeing it, so yeah. Okay, the problem solved at least. This is a cool thing. Let's put it in material mode again, or no, texture mode, and let's just bring back the texture. Now texture is gone somewhere. Where the texture is gone? Yeah. One thing is broken, then the other thing is broken. Maybe problem with the shader? Nope. What's wrong again? Why I'm not seeing? Okay, so the solid mode not working definitely. This one has to be shown. I have to see it. Maybe the wrong. Yeah. So, yeah, can continue. So as you see, now we have some type of things to compare. So this is definitely too far. It's pretty understandable. This is too far. Let's just make it closer to this edge. Move, constrict, Oh, restrict by X and move. Move again. Move again. Something like this probably. Further. Much bigger. You say that this thing has to be bigger? How come? It has to be much higher. That's understandable, but bigger. Okay, let's just make it less confusing than it's already is. Make it approximately the same proportions. Go back in here and let's just try to place it properly. Actually, right now we are kinda, well, right here we actually see this tilt, but we're not seeing it in the camera itself for some reason. Why? We're not seeing it in camera. Because we placed camera wrong way. Probably this is the first problem. So the first problem could be the camera placement, the close proximity of the camera to our just work with the blender. Okay, let's just go to the focal length standard one. Reset to default value. Oh, actually default value is 1. Default value here is 1, 2. This is not right. Default value was definitely 35, I remember. So 35 millimeter. If I'm not mistaken, 60, this is the field of view of the human eye. But since we're working with the camera, the field of view of the camera has to be much, I guess, bigger. There was pretty big drop in frames. I hope recording is doing fine. Probably it's because of the rendering. Yeah, let's continue. So the cool thing, when I actually figured out how to do it, next projects that I will be working on would be much easier to do these things. So I will already know what I need to do in order to do these things. Again, this is some type of an explorational thing for me for now, but again, when I will figure out how to do it, I will do it on a constant basis, much more efficiently, of course, which is a cool thing. So yeah, at the beginning it definitely a little bit of frustrating, but in some time when you actually do this, it would be much more, it's going to be easier. So let's just go with 45 and put field of view to 100. It still doesn't create things that I wanted for them to create. I actually want to create a tilt. I don't like for these things to be like straight. And I think the reason why they're straight is because of the camera is actually looking straight. If I would, for instance, tilt camera a little bit lower, it would probably change this problem. Let's just do this, but do this properly. Okay, so now we need to get rid of this mode. Then we are going to put cursor to selected. This way it will help us to move camera with this. Thing. Actually this angle seems unrealistic. Field of view. Let's just make it a little bit more realistic, I'd say. Just call it 60 for now. Just work with realistic things and then work with less realistic things. So now I need to kind of tilt camera a little bit, and one of the reasons how could I tilt it and not losing zoom on our thing is like this. I think our camera has to be much now. Let's just again put camera to selected, align view to selected. Thing that I wanted to achieve by this is to create distortion. I need a distortion. Okay, this is not working properly for some reason. Just create a cube. Let's just put a cube here. Let's assume that this cube is our table. You don't forget about the ground. There's always a ground. Let's just color it in some type of color. Let's make it darker to create better contrast between them. Let's make it bigger. Yeah, dark one is the bad idea. And now, wherever I put this table, extrude, make it smaller, extrude. Let's just, yeah, this is like supposedly our table. Just make it a little bit like this. Let's like make it a little bit bigger. Nope, it's not that big. So again, the comparison of the table compares to our space. So as we see on our camera, it's not creating any type of distortion because we don't have that much distortion of the third point perspective, and this is the problem like we need to solve. I need to figure out how to actually put a third point perspective into our scene, because it's an important thing to do. Oh, come on. It's becoming a completely obvious thing that I definitely gone wrong with the camera placement. So maybe I think this is a problem of the camera itself. Yeah, I definitely not finish with it in today's stream. I will definitely figure out this outside of the streams, because this is crazy, and it could actually took me a crazy amount of time to do it. So I will basically figure out what's wrong, what I'm doing wrong in terms of a camera placement. Again, ideally I would already have to know how to do that. Had to know how to do it, but I don't, so I actually need to figure out how to do it, because again, it's not very quality streams when you're just like sitting and trying to figure out what to do with the program. Yeah, kinda need to figure out this thing. Where's the program? So yeah, I will continue to do everything in, like, till stream time will come to end. Maybe I will figure out something in the end. I don't know. Or to make this more quality stream, I would probably finish this and talked about a little bit about what we're going to do next, or I don't know, because I wanted, ideally I would want to finish stream at good note, not on some like, yeah, I'm struggling, I don't know what to do, blah blah blah. Yeah, kinda, because again, to figure out this thing I need to spend time to think about it, to try things and understand how to do these things properly. So yeah, again, I think we'll just close this. We will go back to our mashup. And let's just, in the remaining time, try to, like I said, about 15 minutes or so remaining. So I think in this time I will rather spend this time on trying to figure out what type of problems we need to solve in the near future, in terms of a construction, in terms of like everything. So again, let's just recheck everything or review everything. So we can't plan gesture until we will know the proper placement of every character in our scene. In order to know every placement, the proper placement of every character in our scene, we of course need to create a proper placement for our chairs. In order to create the proper placement for our chairs, we need to figure out how to properly place them in current perspective. In order to understand how to properly place them in our current perspective, we need something to kind of compare to, have something to compare it to. Yeah. And we are going to use for that 3D, but unfortunately we kind of stumble upon problems in 3D, and I will solve them outside of the stream. Yes, so again, we can't do gestures for now because we will need to redo them from the ground up if we will choose placement of the chairs or yes. So basically, first we need to establish the placement of the chairs. I think I already established the placement of the tables, so that means that in terms of the table design, we kind of set not table design but table placement, and we know what we are going to look in design of the table. We kind of established a height of the table. Now we know how low it's placed. This actually answers the question about the size of the quintessa, because again, quintessa has to fit under the table, and basically the height of the table equals the size of quintessa. This is pretty easy thing to kind of figure out on its own. So yeah, so let's just make quick review of the things that we kind of need to think about when. So let's just finish with proportions. By that I mean like the final establishments. So proportions, the things that we did not work on proportional wise, or yeah. So we need to understand quintessa size. If there's a quick way to equals to table height. How height is spelled? I forgot. Something like this. Yep. So quintessa size equals table height. So again, this is how we know what restrictions in size quintessa is going to have. Again, to make this much more like manageable to create, we can't make quintessas too gigantic, because again, in that way we could not place table. Angry Birds could not place table right on her and put a table right on her. This creates a problem, and again, that way we establishing the quintessa size proportion wise. Yeah, the stools and like chairs definitely has to be in terms of a size. Yeah, the chairs in terms of the size has to be I think it would be better if we would make them the same. That way we could create pretty interesting and comparison and contrast. So one of the things of the design is create repetitive elements in order to suggest different sizes. So we have 4 characters with different sizes, and one of the ways to showcase how different their sizes are, if something would not be that evident at the beginning, is to create chairs the same size. So chairs have to be the same size. yeah, so chairs have to be the same size, that they're not necessarily have to be the same design, and we could place them, and we probably will place them differently after we establish our composition problems in distortion. But yeah, they're going to have different designs, they're going to have different placement, but they have to be the same size, and showcasing this size throughout the whole composition and throughout our perspective changes is going to be much more easier when we are going to use 3D for analyzing how these chairs are placed and how would we properly showcase their similarity in sizes. So in terms of things on the table, proportionally, I think we need to again make all these plates and things probably human size. Why not? This is one of the things that actually could benefit us and at the same time could create problems, because as I said before, humans pretty picky to things that they are familiar with, and if they have some type of notion of about how these plates compare to Angry Birds, it can create the same type of comparison, linked comparison, in terms of the size difference between Quintessa and our birds and etc. But again, since we have to create something familiar to showcase how big birds are, how big Quintessa is, how big Transformers are, how big these statues are, we need to create something in our work that could be familiar enough for the viewer to compare things to. So I think if we would just like compare or take all of our subjects and objects in the scene setting, including the only thing that actually can suggest some type of a proportional base from where our viewers are going to be analyzing the rest of the proportions is definitely going to be the proportions of our table accessories, because again, table can be could be a whatever size we are give to him. So yeah, we actually can create table whatever size we can. It doesn't matter the size of the table. It's not some type of proportional thing that can be measured. The table can be little, the table can be small, big, middle, etc. So but when we work with the table accessories, these are definitely somewhat the same for humans to handle. That's why they are our proportional base. It's probably a good thing to establish proportional base. I think we had to do this earlier, but I kind of forgot about this thing. But in reality, we had to figure out this in much more earlier stages. Probably on the stage of, or no, this is normal stage to figure this out. I would probably figure out this earlier in earlier parts of this stage, but this stage is basically where you would probably think about that. So proportional base. Again, proportional base is something from where we are always going to something that we are this is our comparison base, something that we are constantly will be comparing all of other objects, all other objects and subjects in our work. So our proportional base is table accessories. Let's just call it one word. Really? Is this a no? Yeah, I don't find the word for it, so we will use accessories. Accessories. Yeah, so our table accessory is basically going to be our proportional base. Forget to use these. What? Why it's not drawing itself? Because for some reason it's drawing with what? It's not that important thing to do, but again, I would rather showcase that this is an important thing. So yeah, our proportional base, our table accessories. How much time we have? And not that much, but still I will finish. Because again, we need to finish on something solid rather than struggles. So yeah, we need to establish proportional thing as a base. We will choose table accessories. So basically, we will establish our table accessories size, and from there we would compare with these table accessories. We will compare all of our objects. Not only us, so as an artist, we probably would compare everything to everything. So in between. So we're going to compare like the size of the statues to size of their birds table to. So basically we will compare everything, but we need to think about things that viewer is going to compare things to or with. So that's why we need to keep in mind that for the viewer, proportional base is the table accessories. Let's just showcase that this is for the viewer. For the viewer, proportional base is the table accessories. For us is everything, so we need to think about every type of proportions. But for the viewer, this one is going to be the more realistic one and more familiar, and viewer definitely will be comparing everything to table accessories. So yeah, let's move forward. So yeah, we establish, so the size of the quintessence is going to be table height equals to table height. Chairs have to be the same size. What else we can establish throughout this phase? So in terms of the constructions, yeah, in terms of construction, basically table accessories are going to be construction based. We definitely will be back to constructional things, but for now, oh come on, let's just use this one. Proportions and constructions, construction. So these are the problems that we need to solve. We need to solve proportional problems, and I will stumble upon some proportional problems along the way. I think there's still a problem of the proportions between this size of the statues, the height of this ceiling, of these gates, the size of the table compared to these things. Right now it's kind of not that evident. We already kind of established everything and we don't need to think about comparison, but as we saw in 3D, when we will work in 3D with these things, we definitely need to think about it, because again, when we work with a 3D space, we need to understand this. And right now I'm not necessarily thinking about how these are separate in size and how they are compared to each other in terms of the proportions and size, but I need to think about this and I need to think about this in real way, in 3D way, like I am right there and I am present in this room or hall, and I need to see them, everything, with my eye in order to compare this, and 3D will help in these things. In terms of proportions, again, we will go back to this, but what we need to answer in terms of the proportions, or in terms of the construction, we need to understand what type of primitives we are going to use as a base for each and every object. So we know that a table is going to be some type of a cube, of course modified cube, but still cube. These are going to be probably modified cylinders, or as I pictured right here, these are going to be two modified cylinders, or modified cones, or mesh with cylinders and cones and whatever. If there's going to be some type of sweets or fruits, we will place them and they're going to be spheres. We already kind of established the basic constructional shapes for our characters, so we know that this one's going to be a sphere-like character, this one is going to be like I don't know, modified sphere character, this is going to be like a banana shaped character, which is the constructional combination of bunch of simple shapes. Like first it's a cylinder, then it's a cone, which consists bunch of like spherical round elements into it, and this is like modified cone. So yeah, we're going to establish these things in terms of the construction. And the last thing that I'm going to address is probably the visual look itself. So after we establish a proportional problems, all constructional problems, we need to establish what type of design, or at least create something, some type of a sketch, how we see the designs. Because if we're not going to work on the basic designs, we definitely not going to be knowing, or we will not know what we are going to look for, or what we are going to looking for. So we need to know what we are going to look for, and in order to know that, we need to know like basics of at least some type of base. And since I didn't work on design necessarily right here, we definitely need to explore on the next stage some type of a sketch how would design works. So create a little bit more complex silhouettes, create some type of, I don't know, interesting silhouettes which could depict these design elements and make this much more closer to what it's going to look like at the beginning. And by knowing what type of designs we will implement, we already going to have a starting point from where we could go in design search. The rest is just going to be detailed information, what things that we like to implement in our current designs. So yeah, we're definitely going to work with design too. So again, proportional problems, construction problems, and design problems. And design problems. These are the basic problems that we definitely need to solve. Or not we need to solve, we need to establish, understand them. So basically by asking a question and trying to answer it at this stage, and then we will know what we need to search for in our next stage, which is going to be reference gathering on specific designs. Basically this is design and construction based reference search. It's going to be where we are going to understand the complex construction of every object and subject in our work. When we will understand designs, basically these are actually going to work with each other, but still, yeah, we need to think about these things. So yeah, basically the next stage is going to be after we finish our exploration of 2D sketching, is going to be a reference gathering again. But this reference gathering is going to be much more interesting because like the previous one was inspirational, strictly inspirational. We didn't know what we are looking for. We kind of, I don't know, we're not specifically searched for something. But here we actually going to go into specific search, and this is kind of interesting thing to search specific things, because you need to know what to search for. You need to know what things that you actually need and what things that are actually appropriate to things that you want. So basically it's a pretty hard thing to do, because you need to kind of know what you're looking for. You need to find what you're looking for or something pretty close to it, and extract only the information that you actually kind of want and that you need. And since we are definitely not going to find something exactly like our composition, exactly the same as the same angle as we already have in here, that means that we kind of have to learn how to work with references. So basically working with references is this is a skill too for an artist. If you can't, or if you not know how to work with references, you would probably make your life much more harder, in artistic life much harder, because again we have to use references in order to create something realistic, but we need to know how to properly use them. And basically the next stage is going to be trying to figure out how to properly use references. Not that I'm already like perfect in this, I still don't like know how to practically use references properly, but theoretically I know the basic approaches to this. So I hope these approaches, or I believe that these approaches will work. If not, we will figure out something much more interesting. Again, this is a growing process. We will figure out everything on a go. So yeah, and the last thing that I'm going to say that probably Okay, I talked about, yeah, perspective problems and compositional problems. Basically, we will solve them by 3D, using 3D, because again, as we saw, I stumbled upon a bunch of problems in terms of the perspective, and I need to kind of understand how to solve them, how to approach them next, and I need some type of directional guide to do it, and 3D is going to be awesome, some type of a mentor for us to show us how to do it properly, and then we will analyze it and we will understand where we were wrong, and after we'll understand where we were wrong, we will become better, because again, this is the way of learning. Yeah. So yeah, I think we will end on this note, because again, we can establish the main problem. So basically, again, we need to understand, we need to solve 4 problems. Basically, we need to finish with proportions, we need to establish construction problems, design problems, and we need to establish our perspective, like final perspective. And after we will know our final perspective, all these problems, proportional, constructions, and designs, are going to be solved in a much more efficient way. But again, the first thing is the perspective problems. So again, I will try to solve this problem outside, at least like 3D problem, how to properly place camera, how to emulate what we're seeing now into 3D. I will figure out this outside of the stream, and on stream I will talk about how I approach this problem and where I were wrong. So yeah, I think on that note, let's just say goodbye and kinda see you later, and bye bye.